This is the Diana De Rosa interview with Equus Television Worldwide correspondent Diana De Rosa. Join Diana as she traverses the globe, bringing you the latest information from equestrian newsmakers, newsbreakers, athletes, and luminaries from across the global equestrian spectrum. The Diana De Rosa interview starts now.
I'm speaking with Dr. Katie Flynn, who lives in Kentucky, and she is the Equine Health Biosecurity, Equine Health and Biosecurity Veterinarian for the U.S. Equestrian Federation. Dr. Flynn will be talking about the New World screw worm incursion into the United States, a super important topic, but I want you to talk about your horse background first and how you first got involved with horses and how that led you to do what you're doing today.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I grew up with standard racehorses in South Grafton, Massachusetts, actually. And my passion started at a very young age. I was driving racehorses as well as riding them. And that passion just led me on a career path to protecting horse health, and that has been my focus ever since. I actually took that passion and went to veterinary school in Glasgow, Scotland. And I ended up pursuing my interest specifically in equine, as I went to work in California as the equine veterinarian for the state of California, where I was able to focus on biosecurity and equine infectious disease. And after about 20 years there, I ended up coming to Kentucky, the horse capital of the world, so that I could become actually the first woman state veterinarian for the state of Kentucky. I was able to continue my pursuits in equine infectious disease and biosecurity. And I have since become an internationally recognized subject matter expert for biosecurity, specifically at equine events, speaking around the world and consulting around the world. And today, I was actually fortunate enough 3 years ago to become the Equine Health and Biosecurity Veterinarian for the national governing body for equestrian sports in the United States, which is the U.S. Equestrian Federation. And that's where I am today.
And we are so lucky to have you because we have a topic that really needs people to listen to it. So what is the screw worm?
Well, New World screwworm is actually not a worm. It's actually a parasitic fly. The adult female fly lays about 200, 300 eggs in the edge of a wound. And those eggs are what hatch into larvae. And those are the maggots that we know and see. And those maggots actually burrow into living tissue and start eating away at that living tissue along the way. That's how they got their name screwworm, because that larva actually screws down or burrows down into the tissue. Unlike other blowflies or maggots that we know of, these actually eat living tissue. Whereas the other blowflies that we know, they only focus on the dead tissue. The other thing unique to the screwworm is it can affect any warm-blooded animal. So that includes your dog, your cat, the llama, the camel. Even humans can occasionally be infested with these New World screwworm. So it's really important to understand that these New World screwworm, if they are left untreated, they can actually cause death in an animal. So it's extremely important to know the difference between a general blowfly maggot infestation and New World screwworm, and take appropriate action to call your veterinarian to get treatment of this New World screwworm. And your veterinarian will work with the state and federal animal health officials to combat and eradicate New World screwworm, as we had back in 1966.
Wow, 1966. Well, I want to thank you so much for chatting with me and sharing that information. And I hope that people realize how important it is for them to stay focused on any information that is shared. Okay, now that we have talked about the basic topic of screwworm, I want you to dig in a little deeper. Why does this happen? I mean, it's been a long time, and here it is back again.
Yeah, so in 1966, we were able to push it down into Mexico, and subsequently from Mexico down to Panama over many years. And so over the years, it's been controlled at the Darien Gap in Panama, and it's been staying in South America. And over the last few years, we started to see it encroaching up through Central America and now into Mexico. And it's kept going and kept going because the only way we can control this is sterile flies. That's the only way we can eradicate New World screwworm. And New World screwworm sterile flies are only produced in Panama at this time. And so as we overwhelmed the production, the sterile male flies could not manage the situation. And so it kept creeping up, and through illegal movement of animals, it kept moving around. Animals with wounds and the larvae in those wounds would move on up into other areas. And soon it's here in the US.
Are there symptoms that people should be watching for just so that they can detect it if it really is happening around them?
Yeah, so the biggest thing you need to do is look at the wounds in an animal. Any wound can be a grounds for that female fly to lay the eggs. And understanding the life cycle, the female lays its eggs, and those eggs hatch into larvae, and it's those larvae that eat the tissue. And once those larvae, over about 7 days it takes them to mature, they drop to the ground and they pupate. And that takes another 7 days or so for an adult fly to come out. And remember, the adult fly starts that cycle again. So the female lays more eggs in a wound. So it's really important that horse owners look at the wounds of their horses to see if they have any larvae or those maggots. And if you do see any of those, or you see a wound that's enlarging, or a wound that has a bad smell, or has a discharge, that's when you need to call your veterinarian.
And is there any visual, when we're looking at these flies, is there any telltale information we can see?
It's very hard because you can see a fly and you can look at them. They do have a different body type, but it's very hard to identify the flies because they don't stay around very long. They actually are only there, they lay the eggs, the female lays the eggs, and then they go hiding. Or they're hiding until they lay the eggs. So they're not around the horse as much as the other typical flies. So it's actually, the key is identifying the larva in the wound.
And what about if you have a barn of horses? Are there things that people can do, even if they don't think they have anything there, but sort of to prevent it?
Yeah, so this adult fly actually smells the break in a skin. And so a wound the size of a tick bite or a biting fly bite is large enough for this adult female to lay her eggs. So really it comes down to protecting your horses from anything that's going to bite it or cause wounds. So number one, reducing the fly population. So, any fly that kind of bites at the horse and causes like a break in the skin can allow this other New World screwworm fly to lay its eggs. So fly control becomes very important. So manure management, making sure your manure is taken away and not around the property. Applying fly spray, fly sheets, fans, so that there's no flies affecting your horse. So the fly control is number one. Number two, or more importantly, I would watch for any wounds or preventing any wounds. So we don't want any sharp edges or anything that could cause injury to your horse. So inspecting their paddock, inspecting their pastures, inspecting the stalls for any areas that they could have lesions. And if there is a wound, taking immediate action to cover that wound with a topical. There are topical products out there that do have a claim to protect against New World screwworm. So making sure you're using those appropriate products, consulting your veterinarian to determine which one of those products is appropriate for the wound you have. So wound care becomes extremely important because we don't want to lay the eggs in that wound. And then if there's any surgery like a castration, we want to make sure that any of those surgical sites are taken care of and again protected for eggs not to be laid there. And it's important to also understand that umbilicals and foals, that's a primary area for New World screwworm to affect. So taking care of those young foals and making sure they're protected at their vulnerable time in their life. So again, it comes down to fly control and wound care and management.
Wonderful. That's really good information. Now, if somebody just wants to keep updated on what's going on with the screwworm, is there some place that they can go to kind of get the latest information?
Yeah, that's a great question. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has a website called screwworm.gov. If you go to screwworm.gov, they not only have the latest information, they have a dashboard that says how many cases we have. And as of right now, on June 20th, we have 12 cases that have been confirmed, one in New Mexico in a dog, and the other 11 cases have been detected in Texas and in two goats and a sheep, and the majority of those cases in Texas are going to be in cattle. And so the USDA's website does have that exact information on what counties have New World screwworm been detected. It also will tell you what states. It also has resources for horse owners, livestock producers. As I said before, this New World screwworm can affect any animal, any warm-blooded animal, and so we have to protect all of our animals. And that information is also on screwworm.gov.
I know that you created a biosecurity toolkit, and it's both in the United States and abroad. Is kind of researching that and getting that toolkit, will that be helpful?
Yes, thanks for mentioning that. That's a great tool out there just for overall biosecurity on any equine event premises. It does bring you to different areas, and one of those areas for addressing is going to be fly control. So that is one of the parts, and again, making sure horses are healthy. I will tell you the other thing we did put out by the U.S. Equestrian Federation just this week is we put out guidance and requirements for horse shows that are conducted under USEF licensure. And that focuses again on identifying wounds. So making sure we are inspecting any animals that are coming in from a New World screwworm infested state. And those animals are inspected on arrival, looking for the wounds, addressing the wounds with making sure we put some topical that prevents any larvae from developing. And again, making sure that we report to state animal health officials when we do detect a case. So all of those resources are on our website at US Equestrian Federation, as well as the toolkit that you did mention. And the toolkit does bring you into other parameters of keeping your horse healthy.
I noticed that you talked a lot about other animals and not just horses. Is it more likely to go to other animals than horses, or are we just as, high level on the list?
It really comes down to wounds and breaks in the skin. So if we think about it, and if you look in the endemic countries, which are South America and Central America now, if you look in those countries, horses only represent about 3 to 5 or 6% of the total cases. So the majority of these cases you are seeing in your cattle species or your dogs. And when we look at the cattle, the risk factors are the young calves that are out on the pastures that no one is actually seeing. As I mentioned earlier, the full umbilical, it's the same with the calf. At birth, that umbilical area becomes a prime area for New World screwworm adult flies to lay their eggs. So again, that becomes an area that is going to be a concern. And when we don't have eyes on our animals all the time, such as our cattle that are out in the pastures, that does become a concern. And they have a little bit higher percentage of infestation because of that. So yes, we all have our risk. Our horses become more risk when there is a wound or a young umbilical that's not protected and not cared for early in life.
Do you think that we have the ability to stop the screwworm, or is the time of year sort of open to making it worse now that it's sort of in the hotter weather? Or will the colder weather help? Is there anything that's going to change this?
Yeah, let me first talk about the weather, and then I'll talk about how we eradicate New World screwworm. So with the weather patterns, yes, this does not like the cold weather. So anything once the ground temperature becomes 46 degrees or colder, those pupa, the larvae that fall to the ground, the pupa that pupatate into the adult, they do not turn into females or male flies when it's a cold temperature. The cold really affects that pupa development. So that's why historically over the years we've seen this when it did incur into it, when there was an incursion in the United States, it was the southern United States. But with our climate now, we are going to see it a little more north. But as we get colder in the colder months, it'll push it back down. So that does affect its distribution as the weather pattern. The other way that it would be affected, though, you have to keep in mind, is if people move animals that are infested and they move them into a new area. So that is another way we do get it in areas that aren't in that southern part of the United States.
Well, I want to thank you very much for all of these different answers. Did I interrupt you? Was there something else you wanted to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to get on the eradication of New World screwworm because it really does rely on the sterile fly technique, which is where there's one production facility right now in Panama that produces these sterile male flies. And basically it's male flies that have been irradiated so that they don't produce when they reproduce with a female, it's infertile eggs. So when we release these, then they do aerial releases of these sterile male flies and they do ground releases of these sterile male flies. These sterile flies will mate with the female in the wild, and the female will have infertile eggs. So we're stopping the generations, but it takes 3 generations to eradicate it from the area. So it is a longer time period. And remember, 200 to 300 eggs are laid. So that's a lot of females and male flies that are being produced every time we have a wound that we're laying eggs in. And we're just keeping that population up. So the only way to eradicate it is through sterile fly technique. And so it takes generations or 3 to 6 months or longer to clear an area of that infestation.
And that is why everyone has to take this very seriously. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining me. Do you have any other important words you feel really need to be shared about this topic before we end this conversation?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to New World screwworm is here. It's not a time to panic, but it's time for horse owners to take action. And there's 3 important steps they should be taking. 1 is inspecting their animals every day for wounds. 2 is it's to report any larva that they find in a wound to their veterinarian so that their veterinarian can take action. And 3 is to protect their animals. 1 is through wound care, 2 is through the fly control. So inspect, report, and protect. Those are the 3 key messages.
Terrific. I want to thank you very much for your efforts on protecting and promoting the health of our equine athletes in the United States and abroad. And I am Diana De Rosa reporting for the Equus Radio Network.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please let us know. Email diana@equustelevision.net. Join Diana every week for another interview with the people who help shape your equestrian experience, right here on the Equus Radio Network.